Welcome to the Turning Lemons into Lemonade podcast. Each week, your host, Amy Mewborn, business strategist and advisor, will bring you the stories of how successful women entrepreneurs turn their tragedies into triumphs to create the businesses that are changing the world today. And now, your host, Amy Mewborn.
Laura Pennington is a former teacher turned entrepreneur and freelance writer. Since 2012, she's served as a freelance writer and project manager for law firms all over the country, and now coaches others how to build their own freelance careers. Laura is also a PhD candidate, earning a doctorate in public administration and policy, completing her dissertation in between client projects. You're going to love this episode. Welcome, Laura. Welcome, Laura. Thank you so much for your time today and for being here. I want to start by having you tell all of our listeners, how did you get started in your business?
I used to be a 7th grade teacher in Baltimore City, and I was also in the midst of a PhD program at that time. So I'd really been preparing for a career in education, was ready to go become an academic, teach at a university. And as a result of teaching in Baltimore, it just wasn't the right fit for me for so many reasons. It's just one of the most troubled school districts in the country, and we didn't have resources. We didn't have enough desks, and essentially there was no curriculum for what I was teaching, and they could only afford one social studies teacher for all of middle school. So they said, teach them what you think they need to know between 5th and 9th grade. And it was exhausting dealing with all of that. And eventually I burned out. I just could not imagine going in there one more day. I resigned my job as a teacher, and thankfully the boss that I'd had before that reached out to me and said, we've got a new position at our company. We know you've just left your teaching job, and that's a big change and disruption in your life. Why don't you come work here? So that was kind of my plan, to go work there while I figured things out. So shortly after I'd, been unemployed for a month and then transitioned into this job, my husband is active duty military, and he was placed on leave without pay for 3 months while they found a position for him. So we very quickly became a one-income family living in Maryland, which is unreasonably expensive. Mm-hmm. So I knew we were going to have to find some other way to generate income to pay our bills. And I literally Googled how to become a freelance writer. And I absorbed everything that I could, everything that was out there that was free, blogs, ebooks, everything, and started trying to find ways to land freelance writing gigs. I did that on a whim. I'd had a few professors in grad school and college who told me I was a good writer. But to be honest, I did not study English or communication in college. I'd never been paid to write a word. So it was a real leap of faith to just go on a couple of professors who said, oh, you write academic papers well. So I jumped in feet first, landed my first couple of jobs, and I still remember what it was like to get the first job, to be paid $150 to do something. I was like, this is awesome. We're going to be able to afford groceries this week. But it quickly grew. So I did it as a side gig for a year. I stayed at that job that my old boss had offered me, and my business grew and exploded. I was doing it all on nights and weekends. Over my lunch hour, I would take phone calls with prospective clients. And it took me mentally a year to feel confident about leaving my day job. I had surpassed my monthly income at my day job long before that point. But creating your own paycheck and not having health benefits and all those other supports, that was terrifying. And actually, I went to go give my 2 weeks notice to my boss, and she fired me. So all of a sudden, I had no choice but to become a full-time freelance writer. And I'm glad I did, because my business tripled at that point when I started putting in all the working hours, and really grew from there. And it feels like kind of like a video game, like you unlock new levels. I worked for amazing clients like TrueCar, Microsoft. I landed a $50,000 book editing gig. I was featured on Business Insider. So all these things kept happening the more energy that I put into it. And people hearing my story, colleagues from grad school, people I used to teach with, eventually started asking me, how can I do what you do? It's completely digital. That's highly flexible. I'd love to do that. And so I created my first coaching program. I coached 2 of my old teaching colleagues one-on-one through a program I made up 1 week at a time. And so since then, I essentially run 2 businesses. I work during the mornings for my freelance client work, and in the afternoon, I build my coaching and course businesses. So now I teach other people how to do what I do and to live kind of a digital nomad style of life.
Wow. You just shared so many different things. I mean, first of all, I think being a teacher, it's such an unappreciated position. And there are just so many school districts that are fighting to give our children an education that we all took for granted. And I don't know where we see that going, but the fact that you got another job, you did that right away. And then you're building this side hustle, and the side hustle has surpassed your income, but yet there's still this, often for us and women in particular, there's still this nagging feeling of, am I enough? Am I good enough? Is this going to continue? Should I really give up what I get my security from, and all those things? And I went through the same exact thing when I launched my business. I actually launched a brick and mortar business with a whole bunch of people, but I tried to keep my corporate career for a period of time. And they're like, we need you either full-time or not at all. And I'm like, I can't. I just launched this business. I can't. And they're like, well, then sorry, we can't keep you. And, those are those things that internally we're like, oh, I don't know what I can do. But for me, much like for you, that was the moment that my business changed and exploded, because I could give it all of my time, all of my love, and all of my attention.
Yeah, I think the plus side of doing it part-time or on the side is you get to test your concept and make sure that you really have something. And for me, that was part of the reason I stayed so long. My mom and my husband were like, you can do this. We don't need the day job. It's just stressing you out to be juggling both. I was still doing 2 nights a week, my PhD classes. And so they were encouraging me. And I said, yeah, but what if I can't replicate this every single month? I need to see a year's worth of income. So I know if there are any seasonal flows to be prepared of, because great if I can make money one month, but what if the next month I have no clients? So for me, even though I was essentially pushed out of my corporate job, it ended up being a huge blessing that I got fired, right? I got to leave right away. I got to keep health insurance for 30 days and I got severance pay. Didn't have to go through the awkward 2 weeks of, I gave you my notice and now I'm still here. So in hindsight, it was right. And it did push me to go to the next level. But in looking back on it, could I have left much sooner? Yes, but we are raised, we go through education, we are taught most of what most people do is go to an office or a workplace and get a paycheck every 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And you give up your 40 hours a week in exchange for these benefits and all these sorts of things. And doing something different where you are 100% responsible for generating enough revenue, paying your own taxes, dealing with health benefits, it's kind of terrifying.
You are totally a girl after my own heart, because I say exactly the same thing, that I come from an entire family of employees, and I was the first person to ever go and leave a super awesome, steady job to go and do my own thing. And, it was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was this amazing and horrible experience all at the same time. I remember my first week in business, I actually came home and cried almost every night. And I said to my husband, oh my goodness, what have I done? Have I just destroyed our entire family's financial future? And he's like, don't worry about it. You've got this. I know you'll make it work. But again, it's those things that play over in our heads that aren't real, but we carry them around as if they are, that we need the security. We need the steady paycheck. We need all those things, when really what we can build from our passion is just completely far beyond anything that we can do when we're doing it for someone else.
And I think all the marketing that's out there right now doesn't help when you're making that transition, because everybody's blog, Facebook ads, etc., shows the bright side of business. I'm amazing. Look how much money I made. And I live this life where I travel around with my laptop and work from Bali, which is great. And a lot of people do that, but I don't feel there's enough out there about the realities of it. You're going to have days you're not sure you can do this. You're going to have days where you worry about meeting cash flow needs and wondering if you've gone the right path, or should you try a different model. There's a lot of questioning and decision making. And that's something I've tried to be very candid with my students and my audience about. Sometimes that means I have to share hard things with them. A client who fired me, a job I turned down, why. I like to give people that insight, because it's not all rainbows and unicorns. A lot of time it is, but then there's these other days where it is just rough. It's like swimming through mud. Mm-hmm. And I think it's good to be realistic so we can celebrate those good times and help other people realize, like, don't give up if it's hard right now. That's 100% normal. And it's where a lot of people would give up. But if you just keep pushing, it's going to get a little better.
Well, that was the whole premise behind this podcast. Was I was sitting with a girlfriend who was a business owner, and she had gone through a cash flow crunch and was going to have to make some changes to her staff. And she's like, I really wish that I could just sit down and watch some videos of some really cool business owners talking about some of the yucky stuff that they had to get through to build to where they are. And we talk so frequently about social media being like everyone's highlight reel. We only put out the stuff that we want someone to see. And we don't tell each other frequently about all the junk that's going on in the backstage that we have to kind of muddle through. And I loved your swimming through mud, because that is so descriptive of the fact that things are not always perfect. We do have to totally push through sometimes to get to the other side.
Mm-hmm. And it's hard because when you're a business owner versus an employee, a lot of times you're very isolated. You're on your own. And I like to tell people too, every day I'm making decisions about things I've never had to make decisions about before. I have no experience at whatever level I'm in my business right now, because it's always expanding. Right. So I always feel like I'm out of my depths, and it's very, there's this thing from Jen Sincero's work, like get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And a lot of owning a business is being really uncomfortable and saying, okay, this is the information I have. This is my gut instinct. This is my best decision at this point in time. It could be a total failure, but this is what I've got. This is what I'm going to do with what I have. And I think that there isn't enough out there about that. And the fact that you have to make hard decisions and shift things in your business. There have been so many different versions of my freelance writing business, because I've constantly taken it and tweaked it and said, I don't like this. I don't want to do that. And you have to get comfortable with that, with, being like the Tim Ferriss guinea pig who tries things out and doesn't get attached to, okay, it didn't work. You just have to say, all right, that didn't work. That wasn't it. Next idea I'm going to try is, and go forward.
So a couple weeks ago, I was at an event. One of my mentors is Todd Herman, and he was saying something, and I had never heard it before, but it was tremendously profound. What he said was, all problems in your life or your business are just decisions that have not yet been made. And when you stop and think about it, at first you're kind of like, no, it's not, that's not true. But then when you stop to think about it, any problem that we're having in our life or in our business just means that we either need to pivot or we need to tweak, and there's something that has to happen to make it not be a problem. And when I really stopped and thought about it, I'm like, wow, that's tremendously empowering when you look at it as a series of decisions that you get to make instead of a series of things coming at you or happening to you. When you take the power to say, no, I just haven't made that decision yet. So until I do, this is the way it is. And then you're like, okay, the pain of the current situation is so bad that I'm now going to make that decision, which is normally where a lot of us go. We don't make the really big, hard decisions until we can't handle the pain of where we currently are. So tell me about the worst day you've had in your business.
Oh my gosh. I know when it was too. In 2015, I outsourced a lot of my writing projects. I wanted to try, my business had hit 6 figures the year before. Mm-hmm. I had done all the work. I was a solo person running a business like that. And I thought, well, hey, maybe it would be easier if I became sort of like the content manager or editor, and I outsourced all the writing projects and was just the go-between. I get the clients, other people do the work. And I did not realize how tired I was from that until my accountant gave me my tax information for filing the following January in 2016. And I looked at it and said, I only made that much for all the work I did. Oh no. Like here I was thinking we're generating all this money, which I was, lots of revenue, owner's income and profit way down because my expenses were sometimes 60 to 80% of what was being generated. And that was the moment when I realized I actually hate doing this. My clients don't really like it. They can tell there's a difference. Dealing with invoices and administrative things stresses me out. I'm not good at it. So I thought I've completely taken myself out of my wheelhouse. I've made no money. And now I have this team of people who are writing for me regularly, and I feel this sense of obligation to them. Like I have to keep giving them work, right? And it was really scary. But what I ended up doing was completely pivoted. I said, I know there will always be a ceiling on what Laura can do individually as a writer, but I'm much happier taking on that risk and knowing what I can do and being able to keep a bigger portion for me and run my business the way I want. So that ended up meaning that I fired half my clients. I let my entire writing team go. Some of my clients were actually really happy with the work that had been done, but it was impossible for me to keep up with the volume, and they fought for me to stay, and they tried to sweeten the pot and all of this. And that was a rough decision, especially to be tempted like that when I was already wondering, well, should I walk away from this? And when I did that, I decided to make it into a game for me. You know, can I replace all that income with just Laura doing the writing with only my ideal clients? And I did. In 6 weeks, all the clients I fired, the money was coming right back. But this time it was coming to me. It was coming to a business model that I liked. So much better. And it was such a low point. I mean, I felt so bad firing my writers, letting clients go, acknowledging that something I had spent a year building just wasn't working. It was really hard to let that go, but I have never looked back. I still run my business the same way today, where it's just me. And I hate to say it's 10 times better than all the stress and the pressure and trying to keep on top of other people. Yeah. I just wasn't good at it.
I love so many things that you said there. So first of all, almost every business coach that you ever hire says if you truly want to scale your business, you have to have staff. And you're not going to be able to do it if you don't have staff. And what you described was a business that had a huge gross revenue, but what do we care about the gross revenue? We really, really care about what comes through to the end user, which is us. And, you know, I tell a story frequently about when I was screaming towards 7 figures, and all of a sudden I realized that was when I was the most unhappy. I was the most unhealthy. I had a huge staff that I hated managing. That was my least favorite part of my entire business ownership experience. And you know, it's really funny how when we just show up as who we are and we really look at our businesses as how do we want to be in our business? What kind of business do we want to have that supports our life and our income? We look at everything very differently and we make very different decisions.
And like you said about being a woman, and like I was talking about, you're constantly in uncharted territory. It took somebody mirroring it back to me to realize that that was the right call. I had a mentor at the time who followed a very similar path that I did, started out as a solo freelancer, built a very successful course and coaching business, grew it all the way to 7 figures. But when he got to 7 figures, he had to rent office space. He had to hire 3 full-time staff. And he was my coach at this time. And I said, you know, I know that my business could make more money if I hire more people, but Laura isn't. And Laura's more stressed out. And it feels like I have a job all over again. Yeah. And he said something that he didn't mean it as a coachable moment, but he just kind of said under his breath, he's like, trust me, there are days where I wish it was just me making 200,000 again. And I wasn't accountable to these other people and didn't have to pay office space and have 25 grand in expenses every month. And something just clicked like, hey, if he's saying that, like he's saying it's okay to say that maybe I'm not going to be that 7-figure business right now. Maybe it's better to have the model that I like. And it just clicked for me like, this is absolutely what I have to do, because I already know that I don't like managing staff now and they're all virtual. Can't even imagine if I had to rent an office and deal with that all day long. So it was nice to hear that kind of validation of, hey, if that's what works for you, there's no shame in accepting that and going forward with that.
And where on earth did we all get this thing put in our head that we all had to be 7-figure business owners at the expense of our quality of life? Where did we get that?
I just think there's been so many stories of entrepreneurs, and especially young entrepreneurs, 20, 23-year-olds who suddenly have this explosive success, and it's marketed as like the 7-figure business, which, you know, as I learned the hard way, a lot of that is expenses. So 7-figure business doesn't mean 7-figure income or even anywhere close to it sometimes. But I agree with you. It's all about quality of life. And, you know, my husband is very much the same way. He's a doctor. And when he started out, he had a lot of his mentors telling him, you could be a surgeon. You could totally be a surgeon. We think you have the mental ability. And he said, I don't want that quality of life. I see all the surgeons in the break room and they're all divorced and they're exhausted and they're losing their hair. And he said, I am all about quality of life. If that means I don't make hundreds of thousands of dollars every year, I'm okay with that. I don't need that. And I just think it's a good thing to keep in frame of mind. Like we tend to get on this track of generating more and more and more money. But after a certain point, it's not really serving you anymore if it's draining you and it's not the model that you envisioned. Like if you got into this for freedom purposes and your business is no longer giving you freedom, it's time for a reality check.
So one of the things I do each morning is I sit in my bed with my cup of coffee and I read a book for a little while. And the book that I was reading this morning was talking about humans and our abundance versus scarcity mentality, and how, like, even if we go to a buffet and we're full, we keep going and getting more or wanting more, because we're afraid that there's going to come a time where there's not going to be enough. Whether we realize it or not, we're often doing all of this in anticipation of the day that may never come and probably will never come, that there's not going to be enough. And so it's really, I think, about doing what you just said, is identifying, okay, when is enough enough? When can I be happy with my home and my vacations and my family and my time off and all of those things? I have a great life. I've built a really amazing life. Why is it I have in my head that I continually need more? And it's, well, we need to make sure we save more for retirement because one day there may not be enough. Or, we need to make sure we have plenty in the bank account because one day there may not be enough. So that is tremendously profound that both of you kind of came to that realization on your own. It seems that your husband felt that way about his career and you feel that way about yours, that quality of life really does trump money.
Yeah, and it's a hard thing to accept because the culture that we live in, even outside of your entrepreneurial circles, what are the news stories we hear about? We hear about these celebrities who pass away with billion-dollar estates, and we hear about people who won the lottery and all these sorts of things where we're constantly bombarded with this idea that money is the cure to everything. And I'm not sure that it is. Like, it enables you to do a lot. It enables you to do amazing things for yourself and your family and all of those sorts of things, giving back to charity. But just acquiring more and more and more just to have it when there's no purpose behind it and it's not necessarily making you happier is a really dangerous road to go down.
Yeah, you're so right. So tell me, what are some of the top resources that you've had that have come into your business that have helped you grow to the person and business owner that you are today?
The first has been a knowledge of how to find mentors who have built exactly what I want to build. There's so many mentors out there, and some people will try to advise you in their particular method. You must do X, Y, and Z. I have found that the best mentors are the people who help you strategize something that works for you. Early on, one of the groups that I was working with, a lot of the women were very successful, but they were selling very expensive individual coaching packages. And I just knew at that time, that's not for me. I'm really trying to build a digital library of resources for freelancers, a lot of whom are beginners. They don't have $5,000 or $10,000 to throw into coaching. I agonized for 3 weeks over buying a $50 ebook when I first got started. So I kind of have always been, I've had some really amazing mentors. One of them is actually, we have a bundled course together now. I published a chapter in her book because we constantly kept in touch and followed each other as we built our business. So that's a big one, being able to find those people who will champion you. The second, I run my freelance business all by myself, but because I do that, my coaching and courses business is really driven by a team of amazing virtual assistants. One of them I've worked with for 4 years. I've worked with several of them for 2 years. And working with these people and building a relationship with them where they get me, they get my business, they know the overall vision, that has been huge as a resource, because my most scarce resource is time. I don't have enough of it. So the more that I can be the one who creates the content and say, here it is, I made a YouTube video, I made a blog, I made a course, distribute it, that takes a lot off of my plate. And it makes it seem like I'm everywhere all at the same time, because I have this little army of people that is putting out social media and videos and podcasts and things like that. So it's really cool to have a team of people that I can really trust to understand me and my audience very well.
So you just said that your virtual assistants have been with you for 2 years and 4 years. And I will tell you that I think is one of the biggest challenges that many entrepreneurs, freelancers, course creators have, is that we've all been burned in the past by a virtual assistant who maybe disappeared part of the way through a project, and you're like, oh my goodness, how do I finish this by myself? Or whatever. So how on earth have you created a business model that these people have stayed with you for 4 years and 2 years?
Well, I'll tell you too that there have been a lot of failures along the way. There have been some bad hires. And even just recently, there was a team that I hired that I had to let go because they just would not communicate. So one of the things that's helped me is I started out as a freelance writer and virtual assistant. I've also been a project manager for digital teams. So I was comfortable taking on beginners who might not know completely what they were doing, but they were trainable, because I was willing to say, let me teach you how to do this. And along the way, they learn a lot from me about setting up retainers and pricing and how to convert clients. So it kind of benefited them too, that they get to see a lot of my training materials and all of that. I've also worked really hard to find people who take ownership of a project. They are not looking to just add another client to their roster. In fact, 2 of my virtual assistants have a full-time job and do things for me at night. So physically, they can't have 6, 7 clients at the same time. I've refined a lot of my processes, and I've actually been helping a lot of entrepreneurs lately, doing strategy sessions with people who have either been burned by a VA and are getting ready to hire someone new, or they just don't know how to write a job description, because a lot of the failures in these VA relationships, the responsibility falls to the client. It's bad instructions, it's bad hiring, it's not seeing the red flags early enough. So the one thing I'll say is, like, and I'm sure that I think Todd Herman says this too, that like hiring is one of the hardest and things you will be facing over and over again. Mm-hmm. It will never be perfect, but learn from your mistakes and tweak them. And, every time I go out to hire somebody, I add an additional layer. So I most recently hired a project manager. This time I asked for references up front immediately in the application. If you don't have 2 names of people right now to give me that I can call and see what you're all about, you're out. So it's about refining that process and then being really clear with your team about what you want them to do when you bring them on, and asking them if they're interested in doing other things. A lot of my VAs have picked up bigger and bigger responsibility on my team because I've said, hey, do you have any interest in learning Facebook ads? I'll pay for the course. You take it and help me implement it. And when someone shows that drive, right, because I picked the self-starters to begin with, then they're feeling more and more appreciated. They feel like you're investing in them and they have the motivation to stay over the long term. Just being easy to work with too, not being super demanding. I'm a freelancer, so it annoys me when a client micromanages me. So I really try not to do that to my team.
Wow. You have an awful lot of really unique skills that we don't necessarily see in a lot of business owners. You have a lot of very clear money management and financial management decision-making skills. You have obviously done a great job managing your team. I have one assistant that's been with me for 2 years, a little over 2 years, and she's the only one that I will say I've ever had that has really shown up and been exactly who I could have imagined. And, you know, it is not an easy task to juggle all of those different skills. So tell me, what does your normal work day look like?
It changes. This is, you know, I have this guinea pig approach to everything where I will try something. And if I notice that there's something wrong in my business, like I'm tired or my wrists hurt from too much typing, I'll tweak things all the time. So, the last 6 weeks or so, I've really been playing with my schedule because I'm actually writing my PhD dissertation too. And it was a little bit easier when I had 2 responsibilities and I could slice my day in half and say morning is for freelance clients, afternoon is for my coaching business. And throwing a third thing in there, it's been the hardest thing. Where does that fit in? Where do I do that? Because I can't do it at 5 p.m. I'm exhausted. Right. So I'm always testing things out. I try to hack my brain constantly. So I know what Laura's biggest weaknesses are. I know when my brain is sharpest. It's early in the morning. So with my dissertation, my biggest weakness is just figuring out how to break that into little pieces and then staying accountable to it. So I hired a coach. His job every Friday is to be expecting something from me. And knowing that I'm a deadline-driven person, that adds in that layer of accountability for me, or getting up and doing that work first so that I have no excuse as to why it's not done. You've got to be aware of your own limitations and constantly be trying to work around that and fit that into your schedule. And there's always going to be learning opportunities and things that are not going to go as well as you intended. That's okay. Give yourself some space. I am constantly apologizing to my team because it's often the case that they do a bunch of work and then it sits there because I just can't get to it for a while. And then I will go in and do all the work and dump it all back on their plates. So you have to let your people who are working with you to know your tendencies. Like, I'm not going to be the most responsive person during the weeks when I'm in the middle of a client project. You'll eventually hear from me. Just go on to the next task and I'll catch back up with you. So just let people know who you are and how you work too.
I love that. You are quite the girl. So tell us, what one piece of advice would you give a woman business owner who wanted to kind of scale to the next level?
I would say it does have to do with outsourcing, because I don't care who you are probably still doing things you don't need to be doing. And I'm including stuff in your house and things in life and also things in your business. We all tend to put these things on our plates, especially as entrepreneurs. Oh, I'm the only one who can do this. No one else could possibly understand. Oh, it'll be too difficult to outsource it. But if you start small with outsourcing and you have one VA on trial who's doing 3 to 5 hours a week, watch and see if that doesn't make a difference. When it's the right person, you'll be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Why have I not done this more often? And then you start thinking about in your house, do I need to be the one mowing the lawn? Do I need to be the one doing the laundry, cleaning the house, all those sorts of things? And as you're making more money, right, you're investing that because your finite resources are your time and your energy. So those have to be guarded like so protectively. It has to be like, my time and energy are the most important things. If that means I outsource stuff at the house, if that means I outsource some things in my business so that I can go on to make more money and do more things and have more breaks for myself, then that's important.
Wow. So do you have like a regular workout routine in part of your day?
I do. It's actually funny because we just moved into this house and we bought it, and my husband and brother-in-law were like, we cannot fit your treadmill down the hallway. And I was like, we have to fit the treadmill down the hallway. That is my routine. We live in Indiana. I cannot run outside in February. So it was this whole big thing. They had to take my treadmill apart in 6 pieces and then angle it down the hallway to get it in our spare room. But they did it. I was just so grateful because I'm like, I didn't have it for a month while we were moving. And I started to feel like I was going crazy. I'm like, I'm not able to do my walks. I'm indoors. It's cold outside. I'm trapped. And so I do work out. I try to walk 4 to 5 miles a day on my treadmill. I usually do an hour in the morning and an hour, like sometimes I'll do like 10 minutes. Like I'll literally run in there and do 10 minutes. It's also the only time I allow myself to watch, to binge watch TV. So it's kind of a reward in that sense. Like, oh, if I go exercise, I can watch Survivor or something like that.
That is so awesome. You have an awful lot of really good like productivity hacks and lifestyle hacks. I will say that one of my challenges is that I often find that when I get the busiest, I put myself last. And so, as you're talking about juggling these 3 huge things, I was just kind of curious if you were able to still kind of fit in your personal life. And it's apparent that you have really kind of figured out a lot of the things that work for you and have kind of built a life and a business around that. That's amazing. Good job.
Oh, thanks. I mean, I also too, I don't have kids. So I know that the picture would be dramatically different if I had kids right now. I am always in awe of moms because especially moms with businesses, because it's just amazing what they do. But you have to, and I slip into that tendency too, like not making myself a priority and making all these projects, and not self-care all the time. But you have to try to build that in. So again, I have to like hack my brain and I'll make an appointment with my trainer because I need to go do that. Or I will sign up and pay for the yoga class because I need to do it. And then I'm less likely to back out of it because I've got money on the line or I've made an appointment with someone else. So sometimes I do have to circuit, my brain like that and make sure that I actually do it and do the things that are important to me.
That's awesome. So tell me, what do you have coming up on the horizon that our listeners should be looking for, and where can they find you?
Sure. So the course I'm working on right now is highly relevant to some of the things we've talked about because I've had so many people come to me and say, I'm stuck with outsourcing. I don't know what to do. I've done a lot of strategy sessions with entrepreneurs who need help with some aspect. And we're finalizing a course called How to Hire and Train Your First Virtual Assistant. And it's all of my best tips that I've learned over years of working with VAs, being a project manager on teams with VAs, how to figure out what gets outsourced, in what order, where to find VAs, what to ask in the interview, how to write a job description, all those sorts of things. So that is coming out soon. And all of my outsourcing and freelancing advice is on betterbizacademy.com.
Wow. Well, thank you. I will tell you, you have been an absolute joy. We had never chatted before today, and I'm just in awe. And that's what I love the most about doing this podcast as a whole, is just really getting to sit and chat with other really amazing women doing really amazing things. So thank you for your time.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Today we talked about journaling and goal setting to grow your business. If you would like our free template that you can download to write your goals and keep track of everything that's happening in your business, you can get it in the show notes at lemonadepodcast.com.
Thank you for listening to Turning Lemons into Lemonade, where women go for support and encouragement to hear how other women business owners turn their setbacks into successes to create 6- and 7-figure businesses. We look forward to seeing you next week.